there is a movement in academia and scholarly circles to discredit the virgin birth, believe it or not. Anybody ever had somebody ask you a question on this subject? Just out of curiosity. What started off this whole Christmas series idea last year, that is so not the right one.
Oops.
That's what I got.
I was wondering why I said that.
No, that was last week. Huh.
Did you upload the wrong one for Mega?
No.
What is that?
Oh well. Anyway, yeah. I guess we're not gonna.
Learning from failure right now.
I could get my train of thought back. What started off this Advent series for this year. I've done behind the scenes before for Easter. I've done one, I think a couple Easter and one for Christmas before now. But what started off this year's behind the scenes kind of trek was the fact that Sherry was in school a year ago. Right about the time that I was preparing my sermon series for the next year. And one of her professors actually came in class, and he basically proposed that Isaiah, the verse that we all look at, it's Isaiah 7, talks about a virgin giving birth. Basically what he proposed here is that this is a mistranslation, and Matthew then goes off in his gospel utilizing this mistranslation, saying that Mary wasn't a virgin. Oh, really? The problem was that I couldn't explain why she had to be a virgin. I don't know that I could have given that answer. And it chalked me up and sent me into the scriptures to find the answer of why Mary had to be a virgin. What I began to realize was that this movement of trying to discredit the virgin birth is larger than just one professor in a college class. There's actually a rather large group of people in Christian academic circles and scholarly circles that actually believe this. I knew that there had to be a why somewhere given in the scriptures. I knew there was a why there. There had to be a why. If it's going to be in there, then God's going to give a reason why more times than not. Sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes there are no answers. But I just felt that there was a reason why she needed to be a virgin in order for this to all happen. Isaiah 7:14 reads like this, says, "Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin will be with child and bear a son, and she will call his name Emmanuel." They're proposing that the word that is translated as virgin, which they are not wrong, it is more times translated young woman of marriageable age. And I began to think, I'm like, you know what? A young woman of marriageable age in the nation of Hebrew at that day and age is going to be a virgin. Just, unless she's a temple prostitute, which she's not, she's going to be a virgin. The case that they make against Mary being a virgin is shaky at best. Okay? Mary was a virgin. the scripture dictates it, and my hope and my prayer is after today, you will know why Mary had to be a virgin, and you will be able to give an answer if somebody says or asks about this particular subject. Because we've been told we can't understand these things, we must trust the scholars and the academics. People don't dare to question them because they're the professionals in the matter. Well, no. They can be wrong too. So the Advent series is making a comeback behind the scenes this year, and we are going to spend the next 5 weeks or so going behind the scenes of various Christmas things. Today, we're going to talk about the virgin birth. Next week, we're going to talk about Mary's song of praise in the Gospel of Luke. We are going to follow that up with Zechariah's prophecy after his mouth is opened, okay, in the book of Luke. We are going to talk a little bit about the Magi because that will be Cantata Sunday on the 19th. So that will just be a short little to-do about the Magi. Obviously, Christmas Eve, we'll talk about the birth of Christ. And then the 26th of December, we will talk about Simeon and Anna, who are in the temple when Jesus is presented in the temple and circumcised. So what I've titled this, since we don't have the slide, since I messed up, the title of the sermon is actually called The Blood Curse of Jeconiah. And when I love the reaction that I get when I tell people the name of the sermon, because they're like, the blood curse of Jeconiah, what does that have to do with the virgin birth and Christmas? That's just weird. Yeah. This is kind of going to be, anybody remember old Maury Povich? The old Maury Povich shows? And you are not the father. You know, he used to be really good, and then he just went into these paternity test kind of thing. And I was just like, Maury was not what he used to be. But he you know, as Maury kind of turned into this whole, you are not the father. Joseph, you are not the father. And we're going to take a look at why. Jeremiah 22 is where I'm going to start off today. Jeremiah 22. Verses 13 to 30. Woe to him who builds his house without righteousness and his upper rooms without justice, who uses his neighbor's services without pay and does not give him his wages, who says, I will build myself a roomy house with spacious upper rooms and cut out its windows, paneling it with cedar and painting it bright red. Do you become a king because you are competing in cedar? Did not your father eat and drink and do justice and righteousness? Then it was well with him. He pled the cause of the afflicted and needy, then it was well. Is not that what it means to know me, declares the Lord? But your eyes and your heart are intent only upon on your own dishonest gain, and shedding innocent blood, and on practicing oppression and extortion. Therefore, thus says the Lord in regard to Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah. They will not lament for him, alas, my brother, or alas, sister. They will not lament for him, alas, for the master, or alas, for his splendor. He will be buried with a donkey's burial, dragged off and thrown out beyond the gates of Jerusalem. Go up to Lebanon and cry out, and lift up your voice in Bashan. Cry out also from Abarim, for all your lovers have been crushed. I spoke to you in your prosperity, but you said, I will not listen. This has been your practice from your youth, that you have not obeyed the voice. The wind will sweep away your shepherds, and your lovers will go into captivity. Then you will surely be ashamed and humiliated because of all your wickedness, you who dwell in Lebanon, nested in the cedars, how you will groan when pangs come upon you. Pain like a woman in childbirth, as I live, declares the Lord, even though Jeconiah, the son of Jehoiakim of Judah, were a signet ring on my right hand, yet I would pull you off, and I will give you over into the hand of those who are seeking your life. Yes, into the hand of those whom you dread, even to the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and into the hand of the Chaldeans. I will hurl you and your mother, who bore you in another country where you were not born, and you will die. But as for the land to which they desire to return, they will not return to it. Is this man Jeconiah a despised, shattered jar? Or is he an undesirable vessel? Why have he and his descendants been hurled out and cast into a land they had not known? O land, 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 hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord, write this man down childless, a man who will not prosper in his days, for no man of his descendants will prosper sitting on the throne of David or ruling again in Judah. Verses 13 to 23 talk about Jehoiakim, who is Jeconiah's father. Jeconiah, or Coniah, as is given his name here in Jeremiah 23. He is also known as Coniah, Jeconiah, or Jehoiachin. Okay, he's got three different names that he's called by in the scriptures. Verses 24 to 30 are the blood curse of Jeconiah. Moreover, verse 30, that last verse that I read, thus says the Lord, write this man down childless, a man who will not prosper in his days, for no man of his descendants will prosper, sitting on the throne of David or ruling again in Judah. Now, with that said, okay, so this Jeconiah will not have a descendant on the throne of David or ruling again in Judah. Let's go to Matthew. Okay. Let's go to Matthew chapter 1. And let's read Matthew chapter 1. Let me start. Verses 2 to 6 go from Abraham to David. Okay? 14 generations. The second half of verse 6 says this, as David was the father of Solomon by Bathsheba, who had been the wife of Uriah. Solomon was the father of Rehoboam, Rehoboam the father of Abijah, Abijah the father of Asa, Asa was the father of Jehoshaphat, Jehoshaphat the father of Joram. These are all kings in the line of David, okay? The kingdom, remember, splits after Solomon. Rehoboam is the king of Judah. There's another man who is chosen as king, Jeroboam, that we talked about last week. Jeroboam, that kingdom splits, okay? What we just went over is very important because that kingdom splits there after Solomon. Rehoboam, all these people are kings of the nation of Judah. So Jehoshaphat, the father of Joram, Joram the father of Uzziah, Uzziah was the father of Jotham, Jotham the father of Ahaz, Ahaz the father of Hezekiah, Hezekiah was the father of Manasseh, Manasseh was the father of Amon, Amon was the father of Josiah. Okay, Josiah was a young king, ruled for quite a while. Josiah became the father of Jeconiah and his brothers at the time of the deportation of Babylon. Jeconiah was the last king in the nation of Judah. Remember, we just read that back here in chapter 22. Jeconiah was the last king in the line of kings in the nation of Judah. Now watch where this goes. Okay? Building the case here, stay with me. Okay? I promise we're going somewhere. Verse 12. After the deportation of Babylon, Jeconiah became the father of Shealtiel, and the father of Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel was the father of Abihud, Abihud the father of Eliakim, Eliakim the father of Azor, Azor was the father of Zadok, Zadok was the father of Akim, Akim was the father of Elud, Elud was the father of Eleazar. Eleazar the father of Mathan. Mathan the father of Jacob. Jacob was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, by whom Jesus was born, who was called the Messiah. Had the nation of Judah still been going on, who would have been on the throne? Joseph. Joseph is a direct kingly descendant of the line of David. If the throne of Judah still existed in that day, Joseph would have been the king. But remember what Jeremiah 22:30 says. Write this man down childless, a man who will not prosper in his days, for no man of his descendants will prosper, sitting on the throne of David or ruling again in Judah. It is not possible for Joseph to be the father because of the blood curse of Jeconiah. Because of that curse that the Lord put on Jeconiah, it is not possible for Joseph to be the earthly father of Jesus. Not possible. You see, Matthew 1 traces the name and the house of David. Because there is a difference between the house and the name of David and the blood and the lineage of David. Two different things. Matthew is the name and the house. Luke is the blood genealogy of Jesus. Notice, if you go down to verse 31, because Luke works backwards. He goes from Joseph to David. Notice the descendants are different. Scholars have a really hard time with this one. The answer is obvious. The answer is very obvious as to why the lines are different. Because the genealogy of Jesus follows the bloodline, which the bloodline is not who? The bloodline is not Joseph. The bloodline is Mary. So what Luke has done, the doctor of all people, the doctor has traced the bloodline of Jesus. Eli, Mathat, Levi, Melchi, Jani, Joseph, Mattathias, Amos, Nahum, Hesli, Nagai, Mattathias, Simeon, Joshek, Joda, Jonan, Resa, Zerubbabel, Shelatiel, Neri, Melchi, Adai, Kosum, Elmadam, Joshua, Eleazar, Joram, Mathat, Levi, Simeon, Judah, Joseph, Jonam, Eliakim, Mela, Mena, Mattatha, Nathan, David. Two different sons. You see, David had more than one kid. David had two different sons. One son was the line of kings, where it would follow the house and the name of David. David had another son named Nathan. Nathan bore a line of descendants that would bear the bloodline of Jesus. Therefore, because Joseph adopted Christ as his earthly son, not only is Jesus of the bloodline of David, he is also of the house and has a claim to the throne, but yet is not under the curse of Jeconiah. Jesus is the only one qualified in order to take that role. The only person qualified to take it. Okay? When someone is adopted, he can take the name. Sherry, I'm going to use Sherry as an example because Sherry is adopted. Sherry's birth name is Sherry Tannehill. Okay? But at the age of 8, she was adopted. And her name went from Sherry Tannehill to Sherry Cleaver. When she was adopted, her name changed. And then when she got married, it changed again. She had 3 different last names. She is not of the bloodline of the Cleavers, but she is of the house of the Cleavers. She's not a blood relative, but she is of that house. When I was growing up, I had, when I got to high school, we had 3 different schools that combined into our high school. It was Central Junior High, Robine, and Creve Coeur. All 3 of these middle schools fed into the high school. Well, when I got to high school, apparently in the school of Robine, unbeknownst to me, my last name is a household name. Because there was a guy by the name of Ralph Bordner who was the principal for umpteen million years up at Robine. Had stuff named after him. He was like, he was the stuff up in Robine. I mean, he was like the person everybody knew up there. I had no idea. I'd never met the guy. What I found out later was that he was adopted into the family. When I went to high school, I was not called Ryan. I was called Mr. Bordner. Because one of the kids said it as a joke, Mark Vershaw. He was like, Mr. Bordner, and it stuck because of my Uncle Ralph. You see, Ralph was of the house of Bordner, but he was not of the bloodline. He was adopted. Doesn't make him any less a Bordner. He just doesn't carry the blood. What God is doing here, and I know you're going, what in the world does this have to do with the hill of beans? God is erasing every human possibility to remove all doubt that Jesus is indeed the Messiah, the Son of God, both fully man and fully God. And that brings me up to the next point. Is the necessity of Christ being both man and God. I'm going to go through a host of scriptures here. First of all, to prove the point that Christ is God. Number 1, John 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Jesus is God. Okay, that is a definitive statement from John. Jesus Christ is God. He was in the beginning with the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. Okay. He then goes on, John does in his gospel, in verse 14, and also says this, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. Eyewitness testimony to the fact that God dwelt in human flesh. God took on humanity and dwelt as a man. So Christ is both God and man. And I know that fact alone is hard to wrap your mind around. How in the world can he be both God and man at the same time? I don't know that I can explain it. I really don't. It's in our limited human faculties trapped in this physical world. It is hard to fathom that. It just is hard to fathom it. Yeah, exactly. What love he had for us. Romans 8 is where I'm going next. Romans 8, 3 and for what the law could not do, weak as it was through the flesh, God did, sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh as an offering for sin, condemned sin in the flesh so that the requirement of the law might be fulfilled in us who do not walk according to the flesh but according to the Spirit. Jesus is salvation because he provides the blood atonement necessary to cover our sin and come to God. That is why Christ accomplishes exactly what he can. Because guess what? Only God can accomplish it. A man cannot do that because he's got sin. In order for that to happen, he had to be both God and man to accomplish the salvation of mankind. Galatians 4:4-7. But when the fullness of the time came, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, so that he might redeem those who were under the law, that we might receive adoption as sons. Because you are sons, God has sent forth the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Therefore, you are no longer a slave, but a son, and if a son, then an heir through God. Remember that whole talk on being adopted? You've been adopted, and you are now of the house and the lineage, or the house and the name of God. That's awesome. Because of the blood of Christ, we now have been adopted, and we now carry the name of the house of God. Those of us who accept that. Not everybody is a child of God. I hear that thrown, well, we're all God's children. Actually, no, that is a theological nightmare of a statement. That is not true. Not everybody is a child of God. Only those who submit to the Lord have been adopted. Okay? We are now heirs with Christ, and that is an awesome statement. Hebrews. Okay? Hebrews. God has to love coffee because he brews. I love that joke. That joke never gets old. I love that joke. It's just so funny. Hebrews. Okay, so Hebrews 2 verse 9. But we do see him who was made for a little while lower than the angels, namely Jesus, because of the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. And this does not mean that we will not die, but what this is talking about is not the first death, but the second one. So that he will taste death for everyone, so that death, the first death, then simply becomes a transition from one existence to another. And as Bill pointed out this morning, an existence that starts right here and right now. Most Christians do not live in that light because we have been adopted, we have been bought at a price, and therefore, we ought to live now in the light of eternity. Verses 14-18, therefore, since the children share in the flesh and blood, he himself likewise also partook the same, that through death he might render powerless him who had the power of death, that is the devil, and might free those who through fear of death were subject to slavery all their lives. For assuredly he does not give help to the angels, but he gives help to the descendants of Abraham. Therefore he had to be made like his brethren in all things, so that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in the things pertaining to God, to make a propitiation for the sins of the people. For since he himself was tempted in that which he has suffered, he is able to come to the aid of all those who are tempted. Christ is able to come to your aid because he's been there. He's been there. He's done that. Here's the big idea. Statement you already know, but if somebody asks, you may be able to explain it a little bit better. Mary was a virgin. You know, we accept that by faith. Now we know why. It's exactly what the word says. Yeah, it's exactly right. We accept this by faith. You and I don't have to know why. The reason I search out why is to be able to give an answer for somebody that is questioning and asks and wonders, so that I can give an answer to them. And I prepare you with that just in case you get asked. Joseph couldn't have been the father because of the blood curse of Jeconiah. Christ was both fully God and fully man. As we prepare our hearts for this Advent season, let us reflect back on what it is that Christ did. I said this earlier, most Christians don't live in the light of eternity. We just don't. Eternity is some little known about time that comes after death. But in all actuality, it starts here and now. And living in the light of that eternity. I can't even begin to describe it. It is not normal. What'd you say? It's when you're sealed with it. Yeah, we walk according to the Spirit and not the flesh. We have no obligation to the flesh. We owe it nothing. We owe it absolutely nothing. The flesh is going to die. The flesh eventually, in the resurrection, will be transformed to a new existence. What that is, I can't really tell you. We have a few examples, but not much.
We haven't been there.
You hadn't been there. You know what? Can't give that answer because I ain't been there. And that's okay. And that is okay.